guys, System 5 here. You can call me Leo. Today I'm going to talk to you about taking a house track and turning it into a trance track without doing too much to the actual music, but just really, it's kind of a remix slash edit. Since I do everything, pretty much composed, original, there is a bit of, it's not about just mixing things on, with a mixer and turntables and samples. It's really about, doing everything in musical time, etc. But it's actually very straightforward. And what I have here is my DAW open with two versions of my track, Desert Crossing, which is a very sort of hypnotic house track designed really to kind of evoke a march across, kind of where the name came from, kind of marching across a desert while playing drums. Because it's part of the Bionic set that I'm working on. It is robotic in theme. So if you look at the album art, it's very much like, 4 or 5 robots, like, crossing the desert with drums. So anyway, enough of that. So basically, obviously I started out, with the house version, very, kind of chill, but again, hypnotic, designed to have rhythm and like all of my music, you kind of have two ways to listen to it, right? One is you can blast it, or you can play it kind of in a party atmosphere, and then you get kind of the, the clubby sort of dance stuff. Or the other way is you can play it quietly and use it for flow. So if you're trying to do something like, working on a PowerPoint or whatever, which I do all the time, put my headphones on, turn the volume, not super low, but like halfway up, and then just kind of zone out. So that's kind of where the house music, the repetition, the hypnotic, elements behind it, come in. And then other times, I'm sitting on a plane, I want to read, but I want to kind of tune out the outside world. So I put on a set, it could be house, could be trance, volume way low, and just kind of there just to keep the mind kind of engaged while you're reading and kind of tune out the outside world. So I think my music kind of works for all of those scenarios. Obviously today we'll be focusing on, like if you were playing it loud, but yeah, so that's that. So this track is pretty straightforward. It's basically 7 tracks of audio and synth and samples. There's one sample track, so it kind of starts out with a keyboard set using like a Rhodes, a classic Rhodes sound. So pretty cool. When it starts out, pretty simple progression. It's got a bit of effect on it. But overall, kind of chill keyboard, sound stuff. So you can kind of hear the tempo, 123 beats per minute, which, is kind of right in the house range. So basically, like, for house music, you're looking at typically somewhere between like 120, between 115, 125, even up to 130. Progressive house, like kind of what I tend to gravitate toward, is definitely, or in a lot of cases, a little bit faster, I should say. And it's kind of one of those genres that kind of starts to approach trance in terms of, it kind of takes the listener on a journey. And it's very sort of, you can play with more ethereal sounds and so forth, and like traditional sort of, not traditional, but like kind of a deep house music where it's more soulful. And you have really maybe more vocals and so forth. I don't really do vocals right now. I do use, samples that I like. So I keep that to a minimum. I really like to focus more on the music and the bass and the drums and so forth. So pretty straightforward, 123 BPM. It is a straight beat. So when we go and listen to like a section where the beat really comes in, so there you can hear kind of a driving beat, right? So you're just like, I don't know, dancing, let's say. Then you can kind of, have a drink in your hand, right, at a club, or if you're just listening to it for flow purposes, that beat kind of keeps your brain kind of in a cycle. It's what really turns on flow. So you need a rhythm to really kind of like zone out, right? But it's not so fast that your head's spinning, and it's not so slow that you're falling asleep, right? So it's right that sweet spot where it's a very, very kind of flexible sort of BPM. If we switch over to the trance version, I'll talk a little bit about it. First, 148 beats per minute. So I put it kind of on the higher end of like, kind of more like a psy trance, turn this off. A little bit faster. Some trance music is, in the 140, kind of low 140 range. Typically 150 is about as high as you want to go before it starts getting really crazy. And then you can go, there's music. I mean, I should say there's no actual rules, right? You kind of do what you like, what sounds good, and what sounds good to you. So for me, like the 150 is kind of like where I want my trance at, between 145 and 150. So I picked like a 148 here. So that's the most obvious difference between the two is the BPM. But you'll hear when I start playing, you'll hear a much more ethereal. You'll hear a different keyboard set. It's a bit more spacey, and again, it'll sound way faster because it is significantly faster. You can hear it's much more ethereal. Really kind of just degrades the bass. With trance music, it's really about, even if you're playing it loud, it's about getting, it's called trance for a reason, right? It's about getting into that zone, to that you're almost hypnotized by just how spacey everything is, but that beat keeps your brain totally engaged and so forth. So this is really not like drink in your hand kind of music if you're at a club, right? Like you're out there, you're dancing, whatever. It's been a long time for me, but back in the day. If you turn it, it's kind of the medium volume with headphones, then now you can do things like, you'll be very sort of invigorated, but you can still kind of focus on tasks and so forth. And if you turn it way down, you can still read, but I do prefer the house BPM more for reading. It just kind of puts me more in that kind of enjoyable sort of chill zone, right? This is definitely not so chill when you're at this BPM. So that's the main difference. The second thing, and that's a pretty straightforward adjustment in a DAW. Now, one thing when you use samples, you need to rekey the sample to the right BPM. Otherwise, it won't be on the music and so forth. But using something like Loop Cloud, it's actually pretty easy to do that, which is what I use for samples. But the other really obvious difference, besides the bass, is going to be the drums. So this is so you can hear it's a much more typical straight beat, but it's a busier drum sound in the sense that it has hi-hats like in between the actual kick drums, where the house tends to be more of a disco type of beat where you have like a kick snare, or kick and snare, kick and snare typically. So it's more like a disco beat. So again, a bit more chill. The trance is like you're just boom, 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 boom. That's kind of the idea. And there's varying degrees of that. I still think this is more on the chill end of trance. There's definitely like, some trance that's just like way louder, more intense. This is definitely not that. So that's the most obvious thing, is the drums. The second thing is the bass. So if you listen, like if I were to isolate the bass, and we want to listen to, we'll just solo the bass here. You'll hear, first of all, it's more kind of acid, and it's again driving, like again to keep up with the beat. So besides being faster, it's busier. So if we go back and listen to the actual house bass, put this on solo, you can hear it's more, it's much less busy, and it's more kind of deep. It's not acidy, right? So it's not that kind of music. It's just more like, groovy. So that's another sort of really obvious difference. Then, I made some adjustments like, on the synths. So obviously I talked about the keyboard already. I'm using a Rhodes patch for the house version. So it's like an instrument that people are familiar with. That's more like, it's been used for jazz music, for, to some extent for blues, for, it's just more of a kind of a more sort of organic type of instrument. With the trance version, I went definitely, not just the patch itself is more edgy, but I also added some effects like some flanger to make it like really sort of spacey and just electronic sounding, right? So I think for trance, for me, at least that's important. The other thing I already mentioned, on the sample, I not only rekeyed, so if we listen to just the sample itself, be right here. Oops, that's the wrong one. Sorry. Here. Okay. Now, we'll talk about two things here. One is, first of all, is 123 BPM for the sample. That's the sort of tempo for it. Second is, I'm using a gator called switch. It's a gate effect, which basically turns off the synth, or turns off the channel, I should say, or alters it in a sort of in beats. So you can program it different ways. And here I picked one that's more of a tremolo effect. So you're not turning it all the way off in between sort of steps. You're kind of making it like vibrate. So think about when someone, like in musical terms, when someone's playing a flute, and they'll play like a long note, but then they'll play a note where they kind of modulate it, and you hear that like I don't know how to make the sound, but it's basically a tremolo sound. Where if you listen to the trance version, so first of all, so here's the actual sample. I'll talk about two things. Let's listen to the one where it's actually the full, the 148 BPM, and it would be this track right here. So you can hear it's faster. And there you hear the actual gate. The gate sound, right? The gating sound. So this is a more of a classic sort of trance gate, right? So it's basically like hard turn off the beats and then turn them back on. So you get that like hesitation. It's just really cool. But I did one other thing too, is I took the same sample and I stretched it. So if you look at, so here if we listen to this part. So you can hear it's a lot slower, but it's still going through that gate, right? What I did there is I turned it into a half, basically I stretched it double, so exactly double. So whatever, 148, it would be like 74 beats per minute, right? And I used that with the gate on it, with that trance gate on it. It just gives it, like, when you listen to that part where it's actually full on music. So you can hear it just kind of like makes it like super spacey, and it's a nice variation from just having the same sample playing at the same BPM, even if you're varying the gates. Other than that, there's obviously some edits, like for example with house music, and it's this may not be necessarily the best example of the two combinations, but in general, with house music, progressive house kind of gives you the flexibility to go a little bit more on the trancey side, but typically with house music, when you layer on tracks, it's okay to start a track right on top of, like, instead of fading it in. So you'll do like 16 bars of just kind of your beat, and then on the 17th bar you start a track that's like, say, a sample or a keyboard or whatever, and you can just start it like at full volume. Maybe you do a bit of an intro, maybe you do on the fourth step of the 16 bar or earlier, you kind of do an intro, especially with bass. You want to kind of hit a bass note that then kind of kicks it in. But with trance, what you tend to gravitate more toward is, again, you're looking for like the listener to be totally hypnotized. So you're really gravitating more toward like sounds fading in and out, or even cross fading. So a lot of times you'll hear, and you'll hear this in some of my other music too, but you'll hear like two synths, right? Like kind of, one is playing and then it starts fading out and another one comes in, and maybe it's related, maybe it's just kind of changing the acid lead, maybe it's adding a purgiation or a different gate or whatever, but it kind of fades, it cross fades in, so the listener doesn't actually ever realize that it's changing until it's changed, right? If you go back and listen to it, of course it changed, but you just kind of like, it just happens organically. So there's a bit of that. There's kind of more stuff fading in and out and so forth. And then I made two extended versions, really more for mixing. So they added kind of 16 or 32 bars at the end, where if you want to do a DJ mix, you can actually bring in other track on top of it without actually getting into the very busiest part of the track. Because the structure of both of these tracks is, it's kind of a build, and then it builds into like a chorus, if you will. And then there's a drop and it breaks down into kind of a long, section where it's just kind of, like driving. And then it kind of builds up back into the chorus. So for like the basic versions, it's okay to just end it at the last chorus, either fade it out or just like just end it like on a crash and abruptly and just let it fade out quickly. With the extended versions, I added 16 or 32 bars to where it goes back into kind of that long kind of breakdown section, so that you can then bring another track in on top of it, cleanly without kind of having way too much going on during the chorus and so forth. I should say that a skilled DJ can mix anything, and I've seen some unbelievable stuff done like right in front of me. But at least, it's just kind of more DJ friendly to not have like the two busiest parts of tracks like layered on top of each other at the same time, where you have to play with the EQs and so forth. So basically that's it. I'll have you'll hear just a short section of each track now, and you can kind of compare. But obviously, if you just go to my YouTube channel, System 5 Official, you can see all my releases and listen to them. You can subscribe. I'm also on Spotify, Apple Music, Deezer, Amazon, etc. So once again, thanks so much for your time, and I hope this was at least somewhat informational. I think really the proof is in the pudding when you listen to the tracks separately, but hopefully with this bit of explanation, you'll get an idea of kind of what my mindset is. All right, until next time, thank you. Bye.